Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast with coach, encourager, and strategist Anna McLaughlin. If you're a Christian woman who has big dreams rooted in an even bigger God, but most days those dreams feel completely out of reach, trust me, I get it. As a homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, investor, and all-around wearer of many hats, I am right there with you. And yet the Lord invites us to live out our God-given purpose now in the midst of the madness. So let's explore together how we can know our calling and walk in it today with clarity, with courage, with each other. It's time for you to live the life you love and love the life you live. Let's do this thing.
Hey, friend. Welcome to this conversation. We all know those places, those areas of our lives where we're like just working on the thing, wanting it to look different, wanting to bring clarity, wanting to bring just a deeper level of victory, right? Where's the victory? Is it really supposed to be so hard? And last week's episode had an amazing conversation with Becky Beresford. If you didn't get a chance to listen, please do so. It's so good. And we were talking about her book. She felt the Lord calling her to write a book. She wrote the book. I think I don't know that for sure. I'm pretty sure she wrote the book. 3 years bringing it to publishers, bringing it to agents, trying to get it heard. Wasn't coming together, but she felt the Lord called her to write that book. And through that striving, through the series of closed doors, the frustration, the overwhelm, and these other personal things that were going on in her life, she came to the end of herself and realized, I have been in my own effort. And we get there. We walk things out for years with the Lord, decades, and we feel like we know our place under his care and covering. And yet again and again, we realize I'm in my own self-effort again. I'm operating independent of the vine. You know, it took me years to realize, and I know I'm kind of obsessed in this season with this concept of abiding. It took me years to realize, where does John 15 fall in the scriptures? It is one of the last messages that Christ has to his disciples before enduring the cross. And if we know anything about any sort of good story, which if there's a good story, it's the gospel. Those last moment messages, we might call it a deathbed message because he knew where he was going, right? He knew what was coming. Yes, he comes back. He was only gone for a handful of days before rising again and spending all those days and weeks with them. But this is the last word. And what does he have to say? Abide. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And yet we find ourselves in these times of trials and these times of hardship and these times of challenges. And we start to go like, but why? Why? When I'm tucked up in you, when I'm close to you, why this? We start to wonder, am I doing something wrong? Well, many of you guys know from my episode, The Brave and Brokenhearted, to the Brave and Brokenhearted, that I've been navigating a season of humility, of threshing, of growth, and been reading a lot. One of my friends is like, you read so many nonfiction books. I do. Yes, I do. And I love to bring them to you. And I don't just read the ones that are ostensibly Christian, although of course I do. And this, The True Vine by Andrew Murray it's sitting right beside me because we talked about it in a prior podcast episode, literally just talked about it with Becky Beresford. It's not one I'm letting go of very readily. But I've been reading other books too. And one of my favorite authors is a man by the name of Malcolm Gladwell. He writes, I think, for the New Yorker, and his big thing is basically re-examining common assumptions, common adages, common viewpoints, and looking at them from a different lens and unpacking how maybe our initial assumptions are actually not as correct as we think. Kind of observing the fascinating. And his writing is so good because he pulls together these disparate things where you're like, what do they even have to do with each other? And he shows the common thread that draws through all of them. So brilliant. Well, one of his books, which has me wondering, is he a believer? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. One of his books is called David and Goliath. He unpacks the narrative of David and Goliath and then takes a deeper look at how sometimes our first impressions are not actually correct. And I'll just touch briefly on David and Goliath, which of course is kind of the iconic story that holds the whole concept together. And we've used even just the reference of, well, this is a David, or here's our Goliath, or whatever it is. That one word speaks volumes of the role that we play in the story. The David is the scrappy underdog. There's no way he's going to have victory. Lo and behold, the Goliath, this big giant, the one who's supposed to win, ends up being defeated in a blaze of glory. And we use it to point to the glory of God. And it does. Absolutely, because David fought in the name of the Lord, Goliath fought in his own self-effort. So it is a story about that, true, but there's something very compelling that's just below the surface, and it is this. We see indications in Scripture that Goliath was actually not the invincible foe that he was supposed to be. There were 3 different forms of warfare that were used in ancient times, and each one had a strength and a weakness. There was hand-to-hand combat, where you wore the big armor and you carried the heavy sword. I believe there's also cavalry, where you're on horses. And then the third is the artillery, where you are standing far off with bow and arrow, or in David's case, slingshot. Goliath assumes they're coming together for hand-to-hand combat, but you can choose in a direct confrontation how you will fight, and David chose artillery. He was well-versed, well-practiced because of his role as a shepherd. That's how he took down the bears and the lions and all of that. Well, Goliath says in the Scriptures, "Why do you come at me? Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" But David wasn't carrying multiple sticks. He was carrying the slingshot. There are indications that Goliath actually had some sort of illness that I forget the name of, but Malcolm Gladwell talks about it in his book, that Goliath may have had a tumor pressing on his pituitary gland, which accounted for his immense size. And it's also correlated with vision issues. And so it is quite possible that the very thing that made Goliath such a formidable foe in hand-to-hand combat made him a sitting duck when going toe-to-toe with David. So what made David win was not just pure miraculous grace from the hand of God, but that the Lord actually equipped him with wisdom and intelligence to bring forth the appropriate weapon for the appropriate task at hand, the appropriate giant that he was fighting. He was shrewd, he was cunning, he was intelligent, and for that reason, he was able to, through God's wisdom, defeat the giant. Okay? Now, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? What I want to present to you today is, so often we view our challenges as things to get through and things to compensate for, or things to be miraculously delivered from, and praise Jesus when he does that. But what this book leans into that I find so encouraging, and I think we would be remiss not to look at this perspective when we face challenges in our own lives, is that actually, in some cases, the very things that we think will take us down are actually the paths to our most effective ministry. And this is especially important for us to keep in mind with our sweet children. Because man, is there ever a place where our hearts just don't break in half than watching our children struggle. In one chapter of the book, Malcolm Gladwell talks about dyslexia. He shares about children who have profound challenges reading. And he talks specifically about individuals. And this is what Malcolm Gladwell does so beautifully. I'm going to do it no services whatsoever. You're just going to have to read the book. But he talks about specific individuals and how their very difficulties actually made them profoundly impactful in their sphere of influence. One of the things he talks about in this dyslexia conversation is he talks about a lawyer who ended up doing, he took somebody down in some big case, and I can't remember what the case was anymore, but he's in his dyslexia, he actually, reading is painful, very difficult. And figuring out what a word is supposed to be just by looking at the letters is very challenging for him. So for example, it was some sort of computer case or something. So he kept calling it login instead of login, because that was a really, that if he didn't necessarily innately know what the word was supposed to be, then he can't just read it and know what it's supposed to sound like, right? Okay. So anyway, this kid didn't read till he was 12, got terrible grades in school, but he learned how to listen. And that listening skill makes him an absolute powerhouse in the realm of cross-examination, because he knows when the defendant or when the witness on the stand is sharing information and really having to think about their responses because they don't have the answers that they need to have, or because they're maybe sugarcoating it, maybe make it sound appealing, whatever it might be. Okay. And so he's able to identify this specifically because of the thing that has held him back in school, that made it look like he wasn't going to graduate. Malcolm Gladwell talks about people with dyslexia who were having to, because their grades were not good, they learned to actually go to their professors and negotiate higher grades. That was literally the way that they made it through school, not by learning harder, studying harder, any of those things, because those things required so much work and effort. But they learned, in fact, what I'm really good at is just negotiating a higher grade by going in and arguing the point. And so year after year, semester after semester, that was what they did. Okay. So we look at these things, and Malcolm Gladwell has this line, and it just reminded me so much, because like many of you, I have a child with some learning challenges where we go, Lord, how do I help her? What can we do? How can we make this better? Constantly looking at the thing in front of my nose and going, how can this be good? How can this be where we're supposed to land? That doesn't mean I'm not called to be faithful there. It doesn't mean I'm not called to lean into the hard of going, let's go to another therapy. Let's try this different support that we might need, and really seeking the Lord. But nor does it mean that it is bad simply because it's there. Okay? That's not the end of the story. And Malcolm Gladwell asked the question, you wouldn't wish your child to be dyslexic, or would you? Interestingly enough, when polled, something like 2/3 of top performing CEOs have dyslexia or another form of learning disability. And the story typically goes, can you believe it? In spite of his difficulty, in spite of this challenge, look at the height to which this person has risen. But is that actually accurate? Or is it possible that it is because of that adversity and because of that challenge that the person has risen to the point that they have? The lawyer learns how to listen. The scholastic individual, the individual who is challenged scholastically, I can do this, I can say it. The individual who is challenged scholastically learns how to negotiate like nobody's business. The child with a very difficult childhood learns how to be adversarial in order to advocate for the best in a patient's health. There's a fantastic story about a doctor who was instrumental in helping to improve the results for childhood leukemia patients because of his willingness to dig in and do the controversial thing. Most people step back, they go, I can't handle it. It's too hard. I don't know what to do. I'm going to toe the line, do what's always been done. And he said, no, we're going to figure this thing out. What if the very thing that is not releasing, that we're begging on our knees, Lord, please take this cup, is the most essential ingredient in your next level of service in the kingdom? What if that's why it's there? And I'm going to tell a story from the I'm like, what's the book even called? What's the book I'm talking about from the David and Goliath book that illustrates so beautifully exactly what he's talking about? During World War II, one of the deepest concerns that the Allies had was that there would be a Blitz on the city of London. They believed, with the high concentration of population there, with the fact that the UK is an island, with the fact that this is really like where all of the state secrets are held and all of that, that it would be absolutely devastating. They were sure that the psychological impact of the stress of this level of targeted attack would be the undoing not only of the people of London, but potentially of the whole entire British force. That all the military would have to come back and help the citizens, that the citizens would be unable to continue to build munitions and all of these different things. And it would be psychologically just a game stopper. They would not be able to move forward. So devastating would be the effects of this constant barrage of bombing. Well, their worst fears come to pass, and London's under attack. The Blitz lasts for month after month after month. Bombings in nighttime, bombings in the daytime, constant. But here's what's so interesting. What they found, in actual fact, was not a population crippled from the psychological fear, anxiety of this potential attack, but that if anything, the populace only grew stronger, more courageous, more determined. And there were a lot of theories trying to figure out, why is this? Why are they getting stronger in the face of all this? Is it the stiff upper lip? Is it just that they're this committed to the war effort? But it wasn't just the Brits that were experiencing this. It was everybody who was living in London, including foreigners. And what they found actually, which really goes into what we're talking about these challenges, because the one thing I forgot to mention, and this is important to know, although, so we're flipping back to our dyslexia conversation for just a second, although dyslexia is quite prevalent, is inordinately prevalent in CEOs, it's also inordinately prevalent in prisoners. So it has the potential to be the very thing that births a resilience and strength in you, or the very thing that is part of what takes you out. So too, interestingly enough, there is an inordinate number of writers, artists, and other creatives. And I think I've got this right. People of impact in general. There was somebody who did a study where they looked at every single individual who has more than one column written about them in the encyclopedia. So it went through literally A to Z. Who is important enough that they've got more than one column written about them? And then went back and did whatever they could to find out what makes them tick. Is there anything that shows up time and again as something very compelling about their life and common among this group, among this select group that is literally being captured as iconic enough that there's something to say about them? Think, Albert Einstein, think, presidents, think creatives, Claude Monet, all of these different individuals. What is there to say about these people that is common among them that might indicate, hey, there's something special here that actually may have facilitated their creativity and their impact? And you know what they found? An inordinate percentage, far more than half, had lost a parent in childhood. Like first at by the age of 15, and they weren't looking for this information. They were just looking for what makes these people tick, what makes them special. And as they look at all of the different markers of their lives, where they lived, how old they were when they became famous, what their contributions were, whom they knew, what schools they went to, again and again and again, they lost a parent as a young child or before their adulthood, again and again. And yet that's something we would wish on nobody. How can that be good? But here's how it all ties together, going back to Great Britain. What they found with the bombings, shells dropped again and again and again, is that you would fall into one of three camps when experiencing the Blitz. Number one was a direct hit. Pretty obvious. You got hit with the bomb. You're no longer there to tell tales, right? You passed away. It killed you. Number 2, near misses. You were in the building right next door. You were in the next room. You lost a loved one. You lost a house, whatever it might be. Those people were more likely to experience high levels of trauma and distress. The loss hit home. Lost a loved one, lost belongings, lost a pet, disruption at the level that your life could take a turn for the worse. And now you have to heal and recover from that trauma. But then we have a nation of people, most particularly a city, but then it goes beyond that, right? That are experiencing remote misses. And the remote miss is, it shakes the foundations. Maybe it gets the house next door. Maybe it even gets our house, but it doesn't get me. And what starts to happen is they begin to feel this feeling of invincibility. I thought it would take me out. I thought it would take me down, but I made it. And if I can survive this, I can weather anything. Hearing this description blew my mind. I've read this book years ago, but since I last read it, my dad passed away, and I've shared in here the experience of losing him. Here was this thing that was held out. How am I going to survive his passing? Because it had taken on this otherworldly quality, the thing we all feared, the thing that I kind of really based a lot of my decisions around. Every time we had a baby, the first thing in my mind was, I got to make sure that my dad meets this child before he passes away. There was no imminence to his passing, but it loomed large, always hanging over my head like a shadow. And then when he passed, and the grace of the Lord caught me in that moment, it was exactly this feeling, this sense of courage, this sense of wonder. I'm still standing. What can man do to me? If I'm okay here, I can face anything. This is what happened in the hearts of the British people as they went through the Blitz. The thing they had feared, the thing the whole government, really the Allied war effort feared, a blitz on London, is happening. And we're okay. We're going to work. We're going to school. We're spending time together with our loved ones. We're having dinner. There were some funny cartoons that came out at the time of, they called them doodlebugs. The bombs, they called the bombs doodlebugs. And then there's like two people talking to each other. It's like, I don't see what the big deal is with these doodlebugs. It's not like they impact us or anything, but you notice that his head is cocked to one side and the ear that's tilted towards the sky is like massive, like he's listening for the doodlebug. And so there's still this idea of like, it's impacting us, but not in the way we thought. We're aware of it. It's out there. It's not that it's nothing. And yet we are actually okay. And so I want to present this thought to you, that perhaps the thing that you're looking at and you're going, why isn't this changing? I keep kicking at this rock. It keeps not moving. I bring it before the Lord. It doesn't change. And we see it as nothing but bad. I want to submit to you that perhaps our scope is too small. Okay? Perhaps this is the very thing we need to grow in strength, in resilience, in compassion, in empathy. One of the things that Malcolm Gladwell talks about that's the marker of a person of impact, and I'm not going to get the term right because I didn't look it up beforehand, but the basic idea is essentially willingness to be controversial, willingness to be kind of a tough cookie and to not care what other people think. I heard this perspective pointed out at one point in another book that I read. Isn't it interesting? We all want to be people who will be remembered, people where others will care about what happens to us, about when we pass away. But if you look at who are the people who literally stop traffic for their funerals, where the whole nation shuts down to show up and mourn these individuals, it's the people who didn't care what anybody thought, right? The people who are actually willing to be scorned, mocked, rejected, taken down a peg, thrown in prison, right? You think of Nelson Mandela, you think of Martin Luther King Jr. Their very willingness to stand against the status quo, to be hated and reviled and dismissed and disregarded, is what made them completely unforgettable. So we see these things. We might see in our children. I have a child where I say he's going to make a fantastic adult if I can survive his childhood. We look at that opposition as a weakness, and maybe it's actually the birthplace of something quite profound and powerful in our children and in ourselves too. That willingness to fight, that willingness to be seen as not acceptable, coloring outside the lines. That's actually how we make impact. We must have it submitted to the Lordship of Christ. I'll just note that. Let that not be missed, right? The Roman soldier said, I too am a man under authority. I tell a man go and he goes, and stay and he stays. The Lord said, I've never seen such faith, right? We must be men and women under the authority of Christ. And yet, so too must we be willing to toss the tables when needed, to walk out some righteous anger on behalf of those who cannot fight for others or for themselves. So I want to submit to you. We want a life free of struggle. And we'll even sometimes categorize it and we'll say, well, that's the enemy. The enemy's trying to get me down. The enemy's trying to steal my joy. The enemy's giving me these challenges. Paul pleaded with the Lord to remove this thorn in his side. And the Lord said no. And what was that thorn designed to do? It was to teach Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Let us not forget, friend, these very things that we view as assaults to our effectiveness in ministry, they might actually be the most profound tools in the Lord's hands to bring about his purposes. So whatever you're facing right now, I just want to invite you to consider, maybe, just maybe, your hands are being shaped for the battle ahead that you cannot even see. Does the psalm say, he trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle? Maybe this is your training. Maybe the dyslexia, maybe the hard childhood, maybe the losses are creating these remote misses where there's a strength in you that is utterly unshakable for the storms that arise. Maybe these are the very things that will allow you to say, what can man do to me? Oh, I've been through harder than this. Surely I can face this difficulty now. Always, 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 we must tuck under the Lord's care and covering. Always, 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 we must come before him and go, what do you have to say about this? But if your circumstances aren't changing, please know that it might very well be that in him, what's being knit in you is far more important than the momentary comfort that we tend to seek when we're going through the hard. So, friend, once again, here's your invitation to deeper courage. Here's your invitation to rise up in the face of whatever you're struggling, whatever difficulty you're facing. And know, this may very well be the path to look at the face of God and say, what can man do to me? When I am in you, all is covered and all is well. What's your remote miss, friend? What thing have you weathered where you can now stand strong and know somehow it was worth it? We're glad we don't have to choose to live through it again, but there's gift in it that just keeps on holding you up, showing God's faithfulness and making you strong for the work ahead? And what are you facing today that would be well served for you to remember that same gift is available now? Maybe this actually is more blessing than curse. Just a thought for today. Grateful for the next conversation. And as always, until next time, remember, you've got this. Only because he's got you.
Friend, thank you so much for listening to this most recent episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. So listen, the whole idea behind this mission is that when we endeavor to be brave with our lives, we need to do it together. Belonging is key. So if you resonated with the message from this episode, share it with a friend. Do it together. Thank you again, and never forget, you've got this because he's got you.